What also can't be understated at this point in our nation is the failure to have those values installed into so many people. And why has that happened? Why is that proliferating across this nation, our state and other places? Because we continually make it harder and harder for young people to take those jobs, whether it's because of the movement to do year-round school, whether it's the movement to increase the demands on kids and making it impossible for them to have the time to access the job market, or it's because we put too many restrictions and requirements on the employers themselves. Attack from both sides are driving our teenagers away from the opportunities to gain skills, to help their family, and to help themselves, as well as help the overall economy.
This bill that we're passing today should have been an easy opportunity for our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to say, yes, we stand up for the working class. We stand up for employees. We're standing up to fix a system to empower people who are just trying to live their life and earn skills as young people to enter into the workforce. But instead, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are siding with corporations like they always do, the hypocrites that they always are, siding with big business and corporations instead of working people. This bill should be simple. It should be an easy yes. We are updating the guidelines from the 1980s, before I was born. We're strengthening penalties, strengthening fines, and ensuring that kids who work in the workplace are protected.
The overly punitive punishments for relatively minor offenses will cause some employers to stop offering jobs to kids. Related to Senate Bill 964, I do appreciate the intent here by both the bill sponsor and Leo. They want to make sure kids are safe in the work environment, and that is commendable. But the current process for approving work permits for kids is working well, and the limited number of violations does not warrant this degree of change. Currently, 14 through 17-year-olds need to get a work permit from their local school district. This package would replace this process with a state-run bureaucracy, big government registry. It's requiring kids and their employers to sign up through the government for permission to get a job. This is government overreach, and it is unnecessarily moving something that is best administered at the local level to a state bureaucracy. Many employers who fully comply with the law as it stands today will simply choose to not participate in this registry, and kids will be missing out on job opportunities. If we had a rampant statewide problem of chronic violations of this act, then I could get behind a registry. However, that is not the case. There are occasionally a few bad actors. Everyone else follows the law. I remain unconvinced that adding bureaucracy would have prevented any of the recent high-profile cases involving violations of the law. I have spoken to local school administrators, and the current process is very easy, and they are in the best position to know whether or not a student is academically ready to take on a job. A state bureaucrat in Lansing is not going to know a kid better than a school administrator that sees a kid every day. If there are any issues that arise, it is a whole lot easier to find a local school administrator rather than a state employee somewhere in Lansing. The thing that concerns me most with this registry is the high probability that many employers will simply stop hiring kids. This is especially true when many entry-level jobs are on the cutting block due to the minimum wage increases that are set to take effect. I know from my own experience that when I was younger, having a job was extremely important. I was able to save for college, pay for some expenses myself, which helped my parents out, and I also learned the value and dignity that comes from a hard day's work. We have an entire generation of kids right now that are in an unprecedented state of mental distress with mental health issues. I very much believe that a young kid who is struggling may very well find meaning in their life through a job. I want to make sure these opportunities are there for our kids.
Mr. President, I think that a lot of us here have probably heard a common saying amongst employers and folks across this country that some of the best kids that you can hire or the best workers you can find are those who grew up on a farm. That there's no employees like farm kid employees. And there's a good reason for that, because from a very early age, those of us who are on farms are taught the value and meaning of hard work and the importance of responsibility, of fulfilling commitments, and of the accountability that comes from failing to do work, because that means someone else has to do it, or animals die, or equipment breaks down, or someone might even be hurt. These are all important values that are learned at an early age, whether you're working on a farm or take a job as a lifeguard or as a summer camp worker or as somebody who's helping with a youth program, someone who's working in for the county and mowing grass at a park. These are all critical parts of the growing up process. So it shouldn't just be farm kids who are the great employees out there that employers and colleges are looking for. It should be all of our kids. And many of us in this room grew up having those summer jobs and those opportunities because employers wanted to take a chance on a couple of kids, knew that it wasn't a long-term prospect, and if that kid did a bad job mowing the grass at the park, it wasn't the end of the world, and they'd get a different high schooler who could come in and do those jobs. Movie theater jobs, drive-through jobs, all of these types of jobs, those entry points for our teenagers, teaching them a skill, giving them self-respect, giving them some cash in their pockets, whether that was to help their families, help their own personal hobbies, or help with their college education. The value of work during the teenage years cannot be understated.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, when I think about why this bill is needed and necessary in today's day and age, oftentimes people think that young people are only working in summer service industry jobs, like I did. I worked at an ice cream shop through high school. I worked at a banquet facility that hosted weddings and things like that all throughout my high school and college experience. And I was an eager young student who wanted to start working at the age of 15 under Michigan law. That was a job that many of our students take and are in these types of positions to learn what it's like to be in the economy and have money for yourself as a young student. That's not for every kid. These are kids that we're talking about. I want to highlight a story from 2019 in Ionia County, where an employer illegally hired a 17-year-old to work at a meat processing facility. That 17-year-old, that young man, that child, got his hand completely cut off after getting stuck in a meat grinder. He was someone that should have never been employed at this factory, at this facility. He was someone who the employer willfully knew was not to be in that position because of his age. The employer hired him anyways. And without supervision, without any type of regulation or oversight, this young man lost his hand working at a factory. How much was that hand worth? According to the fine, barely over $1,000. That's what the employer was slapped with as a fine for this young man losing the ability to use his hand going forward. These are real world consequences of what child labor violations look like.
Mr. President, I was a teacher of mostly juniors and seniors for a couple decades, and I can tell you that whatever penalties are on the books for working kids late into the night are not enforced or strict enough. Teens, if working with cash, are only allowed to work till 8 p.m. or dusk. No cash, 9 p.m. There's a kid, I remember his face, I can't remember his name. Very, very smart kid. Worked at an industry that was mentioned by the senator from the 38th district in his speech. And the kid would get home so late that he could not make it to first and second hour. And despite being bright, he fell behind and failed my class and could not graduate on time. He wanted the money to pay for his car. $10 an hour, whatever it was at that time, was considered a lot of money. He didn't have the parental support or knowledge enough to know that had he graduated high school, his lifelong earning ability would far surpass what he made at his job that worked him beyond the acceptable hours. There are a lot of kids like him. The ones who were falling asleep all the time, tardy to first hour, couldn't make first hour especially, were the ones who were working late into the night. We have to do better for our kids and their academics. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like my remarks printed in the Journal.